I stood in the north region of the great Tianyuan world, facing the judgment of the Shushan sword sect. My name was Meng Fan. I was a handyman disciple, and according to the results of the latest assessment, I was dead last. In this sect, the rule was simple. The bottom performer got cut. You're being expelled. The supervisor, Wang Zhisher, said coldly. I stared at him, stunned. I had been in this world for less than 2 days. This wasn't how the script was supposed to go. I quickly searched through the memories of the original owner of this body. Supervisor Wang. I started, sounding confused. I remember the results. I was second to last. I know that's still embarrassing, but usually, only the very last person gets kicked out. Wang Zhisher didn't blink. The man who came in last, Yang Qian, broke the sect rules and was already expelled. That makes you the new last place. I felt like I'd been slapped. Was this even allowed? I had just arrived, planning to use the Shushan sword sect as my stepping stone to greatness. If I got kicked out now, I'd be branded a failure. No other sect would take me. Worse, this world was incredibly dangerous. Without the protection of the sect, I'd be dead before I could even find a place to sleep. Supervisor, please, I said, trying to stay calm. Can't we make an exception? Even if Yang Qian is gone, he was still the one who failed the test. The expulsion quota should stay with him, right? I reached into my robe and pulled out a low-grade spirit stone. It was my entire life savings. The spiritual energy inside was already 30% drained, but it was all I had. I pressed it into his hand. Wang Zhisher looked at the stone. It wasn't much, but he tucked it away anyway. Meng Fan, be realistic. Even if you stay today, you'll just be at the bottom again next time. Why struggle? A disciple standing next to him, Yang Fei, spoke up with a sneer. Junior brother Meng, look at your talent. You have a trash-grade spirit root. You'll never make it here. Just leave and find a normal job. Yang Fei was a top 3 performer and had already been taken in as an unofficial disciple by Wang Zhisher. He looked down on me, and honestly, I couldn't blame him. In this world, spirit roots were everything. They went from trash to low, middle, high, earth, heaven, and finally, God grade. Having a trash-grade root meant I was basically cannon fodder in the world of cultivation. The original Meng Fan was a total loser. But I wasn't. When I crossed over into this body, I brought something with me, a talent called Sword God's Intuition. It was terrifying. It gave me a natural heart, soul, and spirit for the sword. I could learn any technique instantly. I could understand any sword intent just by looking at it. Given enough time, I was destined to become a sword immortal. But I hadn't had time yet. Supervisor Wang, give me one more chance, I said, my voice firm. I'll work harder. I won't be last next time. I promise. Wang Zhisher sighed. Every failing disciple says the same thing. But you have a point. Technically, Yang Qian was the last one. Expelling you now is a bit irregular. I breathed a sigh of relief. The bribe had worked. Thank you, Supervisor, I said, bowing. He turned to leave, but stopped after half a step. He looked back at me with a strange smile. Even if I let you stay, the next assessment will be your end. How about I show you a better path? I felt a surge of suspicion. Was one half-empty spirit stone really enough to make this guy helpful? What kind of path? I asked. Go to the Sword Pavilion, he said. Become a sword guardian. The Sword Pavilion? I knew the name, but as a lowly handyman, I'd never been allowed near it. Only elite outer disciples and inner disciples went there to pick out weapons. The pay is the same as an outer disciple, Wang Zhisher continued. And you won't have to take the handyman assessments anymore. You won't have to worry about being expelled. It sounded too good to be true, but I had no other options. I took the token from his hand and thanked him again. As I walked away toward the pavilion, I knew there might be a catch. But I was a desperate man. If there was trouble coming, I'd deal with it when it arrived. Behind me, Yang Fei watched me go, his brow furrowed. Master, he whispered to Wang Zhisher. Didn't senior brother Qian ask you to get rid of him? Why did you give him a spot in the sword pavilion? Senior brother Qian is the son of an elder. You shouldn't offend him. Wang Zhisher let out a cold, sharp laugh. Offend him? You don't understand. By sending that boy to the sword pavilion, I've already killed him. Yang Fei blinked, confused. But why does senior brother Qian even care about a nobody like Meng Fan? Because of Li Shuero, Wang Zhisher replied. The name hit Yang Fei like a physical blow. Li Shuero was the sect's golden girl. She was a genius who had climbed from handyman to inner disciple in record time. There were even rumors she was being groomed to be a core disciple. Qian Lechi has been chasing Li Shuero for a long time, Wang Zhishir said, his eyes narrowing. But she won't even look at him. Do you know why? Yang Fei stared at Wang Zhishir, his eyes wide with confusion. Wait, does this have something to do with Meng Fan? Exactly, Wang Zhishir replied, a cold smirk playing on his lips. Li Shuero and Meng Fan grew up together. They were childhood sweethearts. Qian Lechi found out that the person Li Shuero actually likes is Meng Fan. That's why he wanted him dealt with. Yang Fei looked like he'd been slapped. Impossible. How could a genius like Li Shuero love a piece of trash like Meng Fan? Wang Zhishir shook his head slowly. Their village was wiped out by the Sky Eagle Demon cult. Only the two of them survived. Before they joined the Shushan Sword sect, they only had each other to rely on. Their bond is deep. If Qian Lechi wants Li Shuero, he has to remove the stumbling block in his way. That block is Meng Fan. Meanwhile, I was already heading toward the sword pavilion, clutching the bronze token. As soon as I arrived, I saw an old man. He was dressed in rags, sitting on a small wooden stool by the entrance. I felt a sudden surge of respect. In all the stories I'd read, people who looked like this in places like this were always hidden masters. I bowed slightly. The old man glanced at me, his face expressionless. Kid, you're in the wrong place. You shouldn't be here. I quickly stepped forward and offered the token with both hands. Senior, I'm the new sword guardian disciple. The old man took the token, glanced at it, and tossed it back to me. He let out a cold laugh. Who did you piss off to get sent here as a sword guardian? My heart sank. I knew Wang Zhishir wasn't being kind. Senior, what do you mean by that? I asked cautiously. The old man sighed and shook his head. It doesn't matter now. Once you take that token, you're part of the sword pavilion. It's too late to regret it. If you try to back out now, they'll treat you as a sect traitor. That means death. Just stay here and do your job. And don't call me senior. My name is Luo. Just call me senior brother Luo. I stared at his white hair and wrinkled skin. He looked like he was 80. Okay, senior brother Luo, I stammered. Luo gave me a grim smile and stood up. Follow me. He led me through the main doors into a massive, hollow hall. The air was heavy, thick with a sharp, metallic tang. Thousands of swords were lined up in rows, stretching as far as I could see. Suddenly, a sword in the corner erupted. A flash of black light shot toward me like a bolt of lightning. It happened so fast I couldn't even blink. The blade light stopped just an inch from my face before dissolving into nothing. I froze, my heart hammering against my ribs. Senior brother, what was that? That was Chiwa testing you, Luo said calmly. It's the most wicked sword on the first floor. It challenges anyone who enters. That was just a scare tactic. If it actually wanted to kill you, you'd be a corpse right now. I swallowed hard. The swords here were more terrifying than the people. It was like they were alive. From now on, the first floor is your responsibility, Luo continued. Be careful. The swords in here are more dangerous than the people outside. Surviving here isn't easy. I nodded, feeling the weight of his words. What about the other floors? I asked. There were 5 floors in total. Luo's face went cold. Don't worry about them. If you want to live, stay away from them. Don't let your curiosity kill you. I made a mental note right then. Never, ever go to the 2nd floor. I was already starting to regret this. Wang Zhishir hadn't given me a promotion. He'd handed me a death sentence. Luo saw the look on my face and laughed. Scared? It's too late for that. But look on the bright side. A sword guardian gets the same pay as an outer disciple. You're basically at 0 cultivation right now, probably just a handyman. If you survive a year here, you'll be promoted directly to an inner disciple. The rewards were high, but the risk was higher. I looked at Luo again. Senior brother, how long have you been here? 2 years, he said. I was stunned. I thought he'd been here for decades. 3 years ago, I was a regular outer disciple, Luo said, touching his white hair with a sigh. I was only 25 back then. My jaw nearly dropped. If he was 25 3 years ago, he was only 28 now. He looked older than my grandfather. Then you. Why do you look like this? I asked, though I already feared the answer. Luo smiled bitterly. The swords. Many of these blades have tasted the blood of thousands. Their masters died, and they were brought here, but they aren't happy about it. They vent their murderous intent constantly. We, the Guardians, are the ones who have to soak it up. That's why I asked who you offended. This job eats you alive. He patted my shoulder, a gesture of pity between two doomed men. Thank you for telling me, senior brother, I said. I felt trapped. I couldn't leave, and I didn't even know why I was here. I needed to find out why Wang Zhishir had it out for me. Luo spent the rest of the afternoon showing me the ropes and explaining the rules. When the sun began to set, he closed the massive heavy doors. At this hour, the sword pavilion stays shut, Luo explained. No one gets in, not even the sect master. Well, that's the rule anyway. I doubt anyone would actually stop him. He led me to a small room. It was tiny, but clean. This is yours. I'm right next door. If anything happens, shout. He disappeared into his room without another word. It was only about 7 in the evening, and I wasn't tired. I couldn't stop thinking about those swords. I stood up and walked out of the room. I walked into the main hall on the first floor of the sword pavilion. Rows of wooden racks stretched into the shadows, each holding blades that radiated a bone-chilling cold. From now on, these swords were my only companions. I had been in this world for exactly 2 days. I barely knew anything about cultivation. To make matters worse, I was a disciple of the Shushan sword sect, yet I didn't even own a sword of my own. I reached out and picked up an unremarkable longsword. I wasn't brave enough to touch the ones that looked powerful, fearing I couldn't handle their energy. I chose a plain one instead. The moment my fingers brushed the hilt, a strange sensation washed over me. It wasn't a hallucination. A stream of information flooded my mind. Name, Qingyu. Weight, 3 pounds, 2 ounces. Length, 3 feet, 1 inch. Material, black iron. Forged with earth fire. I realized this was a gift from my sword god talent. It was a nice perk, but the information itself didn't do much. I knew this talent had to be capable of more. I slowly unsheathed the Qingyu sword. As the steel slid free, a faint ripple of energy surged into my body. I frowned. I felt something enter me, but the feeling vanished before I could grasp it. It was incredibly strange. I placed Qingyu back on the rack and picked up another sword. Information flashed again. Name, Feiyu. Weight, 1 pound, 7 ounces. Length, 2 feet, 6 inches. Material, Feiyu wood. Carved with the 1,000 silk silver technique. Soaked in blood jade for 7 days and nights. It was a wooden sword. It hadn't been forged in fire, only carved. Yet, I could feel that this wooden blade was far more lethal than the iron Qingyu. Suddenly, a violent burst of malevolent energy, a sword shash, exploded from the hilt. The Qingyu sword had been brand new, clean of blood. But this Feiyu sword had a history. Its previous master had died in battle, and the blade had tasted countless lives. After its master fell, the resentment trapped inside had curdled into something dark. Since my cultivation was basically zero, I had no way to fight it. If this energy invaded my heart, I was a dead man. I panicked. Despair started to set in. Then, my talent kicked in. The sword god ability flared to life, and the dark energy inside me vanished instantly. In its place, an image appeared in my mind. I saw a woman in flowing white robes dancing with the Feiyu sword. Her movements were elegant, her footwork as graceful as a startled swan. I had just absorbed the techniques hidden within the blade. I learned 2 skills, the Feiyu sword manual and the golden swan steps. Thanks to my talent, my understanding of the sword style was even deeper than the woman in the vision. However, I only grasped the basics of the footwork. My talent only gave me a massive boost for sword-related skills. Still, it was enough. I had mastered a high-level sword technique in seconds. I pulled the Feiyu sword from its scabbard. Just like before, a faint trail of light flowed from the blade into my body. I couldn't see inside my own dantian yet, so I didn't realize the light was settling there after circulating through my veins. My gut told me this was a good thing. I just needed more power to understand what it actually was. I wiped the Feiyu sword clean and put it back. Senior brother Luo told me I had to clean every sword on this floor within a year. That meant about 20 swords a day. I felt a surge of excitement. If I touched every sword in here, how many techniques would I learn? I could combine them all and create my own path. I moved to pick up a third sword, careful to look for another weak one. I didn't want any more surprises. But as I reached out, a sword I hadn't even looked at suddenly rose into the air. It floated right in front of my face. It was a spirit sword. Only those can move on their own. My face went pale. I knew from talking to Luo that the pavilion was dangerous, and it looked like trouble had finally found me. Before I could even yell for help, the world around me blurred. The racks and the hall vanished. I was standing in a dark, bottomless void. An illusion. I gritted my teeth. A woman in a vibrant red dress appeared out of the darkness. She was breathtaking, exquisite features, long flowing hair, and deep red lips. She smiled at me, her gaze full of a magnetic, predatory charm. I stayed calm. Luo told me the danger here was gradual, not instant death on day one. I wanted to see what she was playing at. The scene shifted again. A bed appeared, and the woman reclined on it, letting her red dress slide down to reveal a silken shoulder. She beckoned me over with a playful, sultry look. My heart hammered against my ribs. My throat went dry. She was trying to seduce me. To any other teenage boy, this would be impossible to resist. But I wasn't just any teenager. I had seen plenty of this stuff in my previous life on Earth. To me, this was amateur hour. More importantly, I knew this wasn't a romantic encounter. It was a death trap. I took a deep breath and looked her in the eye. "Miss, give it a rest. You're beautiful, but you can't tempt me." She stood up, walking toward me with bare feet. She reached out, hooking a slender finger under my chin. "Oh, is it because I'm not pretty enough for your taste, my lord?" I shook my head. "That's not it. You're a stunning demoness," I said, looking her straight in the eye. "But you want to suck the life out of me. I'm not exactly eager to hand it over." The woman in red froze. Her seductive smile flickered into a look of genuine surprise. She hadn't expected me to be so blunt. "I'm impressed," she murmured, her voice like silk. "You have almost no cultivation, yet your willpower is incredible. Most boys your age would have lost their minds by now." "It's because I have no cultivation that you should let me go," I replied quickly. "Even if you did drain me, there's barely any energy in this body to take." She let out a soft, melodic laugh. "I'm not a demoness, little one, and I don't want your young energy. I want your vitality, your very life force." Her fingers began to wander again. They traced a slow, agonizing path along my jawline and down toward my neck. It was hard to stay focused. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to lean into her touch, but I knew better. "Don't worry," she whispered, leaning closer. "I can't take your life unless you cooperate. If you don't give in to me, I can't touch it." In my mind, vitality and yang energy were the same thing. If she drained me, I was a dead man. "In that case, miss, why don't you just let me go?" She chuckled, her eyes sparkling with amusement. "You're much more interesting than the last boy. He didn't even last 3 months before he was completely spent. He's dead and buried now. You? I think you might last a few days longer." My heart skipped a beat. Cold sweat broke out on my back. Old Kai had mentioned the previous disciple lasted 3 months and then left. I thought he meant the guy quit his job. I didn't realize left meant he was carried out in a coffin. The horror of the sword pavilion finally started to sink in. This wasn't just a creepy job. It was a death sentence. "Are you scared now?" she asked, her laughter growing louder. "Miss," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the chill running down my spine. "Since you know you can't tempt me, could you please stop acting so provocative? It's unnecessary." She suddenly shifted her posture. She sat on the edge of the bed with a dignified, elegant air, looking like a highborn lady. "Oh, is this style more to your liking, my lord?" I cleared my throat and didn't answer. She was playing games with me, and I couldn't afford to lose. I had to stay serious. If I showed even a hint of lust, she'd pounce. "I didn't expect to find such a straight-laced boy in the Shushan sword sect," she said, her expression softening. "Fine. It's been fun. Don't call me Miss anymore. My name is Hongqi." "Understood, Miss Hongqi," I replied. She rolled her eyes at me and flicked her long red sleeve across my vision. The world blurred. When my eyes cleared, the dark void and the red bed were gone. I was back in the dusty hall of the sword pavilion, standing in front of a wooden rack. Before me sat a long sword emitting a faint, eerie red glow. In a nearby room, old Kai opened his eyes from his meditation. A small smile played on his lips. That kid, not bad at all. I didn't know I was being watched. I was too busy staring at the glowing sword. Against my better judgment, I reached out and touched the hilt. The moment my skin met the metal, a flood of information rushed into my brain. Name, Hongqi. Weight, 6 caddies, 7 tails. Length, 1 foot, 9 inches. Material, dark silver iron. Forged over 10 days and nights in extreme solar fire. Then came the final detail that made my stomach turn. Method, forged with the soul of a young girl. I frowned, a wave of disgust washing over me. Human sacrifice. It was barbaric. I realized then that the girl I had just seen in the illusion, the woman in red, was likely the soul trapped inside this blade. Her name was Hongqi. The sword was Hongqi. She wasn't a demoness. She was a victim. I sighed and pulled the sword slightly from its scabbard. Just like before, a stream of energy flowed from the blade into my body, racing through my meridians before settling in my dantian. That was 3 times now. Every time I handled a sword, this mysterious energy entered me. I was surprised, though. The Feiyu sword from earlier had attacked me with fierce sword chi, but this Hongqi sword, despite its dark origins, was calm. Maybe it was because I hadn't succumbed to the illusion. We were acquainted now, so it didn't see me as an enemy. It was a bit of a trade-off. Without the aggressive sword chi, my sword god talent didn't trigger, meaning I didn't gain any new memories or techniques. But considering how dangerous this spirit sword was, I was fine with that. I wasn't strong enough to gamble with my life every time I cleaned a weapon. I put Hongqi back and spent the rest of the day cleaning 17 more swords. None of them had active sword chi. Most of the blades on the first floor were new and hadn't tasted blood yet. I was also being careful, avoiding the ones that looked particularly ominous. By the time I finished my 20-sword quota, my dantian felt strangely full. I didn't know what that energy was, but it didn't feel harmful. I headed back to my room and collapsed into sleep. The next morning, I took the Feiyu sword out to the courtyard. I started practicing the Feiyu sword technique I had learned the day before. The original owner of this body had been a total failure. He'd been at Shushan for years and hadn't mastered a single technique. His trash-tier, spiritual route was no joke. But as I moved, the sword felt like an extension of my arm. The memories I'd absorbed from the sword's previous owner allowed me to perform the moves with perfect precision. Not bad, a voice called out. I stopped and saw old Kai leaning against his doorway. Your cultivation is low, but your form is solid, he said, nodding. You must have practiced that for years to get it that smooth. I gave him a modest smile and didn't correct him. I couldn't exactly tell him I'd learned it in 5 seconds yesterday. My talent hadn't just taught me the moves, it had optimized them. I'm heading out to run some errands today, old Kai said. The first floor is yours to watch. Remember the rules I told you. I've got it, old Kai, I promised. Once he left, the massive hall felt incredibly empty and cold. I glanced at the stairs leading to the second floor. I shook my head. Old Kai hadn't forbidden me from going up, but I wasn't an idiot. If the first floor had soul-sucking swords, the second floor probably had things that could erase me from existence. I went back to work. I wanted to get my 20 swords done early. Everything was routine until I reached the 8th sword of the day. As soon as my fingers brushed the scabbard, a blast of freezing sword chi lunged at me like a cornered animal. Name, Bai Yi. Weight, 9 caddies, 3 tails. The sword was 2 feet, 3 inches, and 3 fin long. It was forged from profound iron over 10 days and 10 nights, struck by a hammer 900 times to reach its final form. On the surface, it was a common weapon, but it had a dark history. It had tasted the blood of 3,615 people. It was a precursor to a demonic blade. A sword like this was ordinary, but its previous owner definitely wasn't. The sheer amount of blood it had shed created a terrifying, concentrated killing intent. As soon as I touched it, that murderous aura, the sword Shah, surged into my body. My face went pale instantly. I felt my heart tighten. If any other handyman disciple had been standing here, that initial shock would have killed them on the spot. They were too weak. Coming to the sword pavilion was a death sentence for them. Even outer sect disciples would be lucky to survive a single day here. But I wasn't like them. My talent, sword god communication, kicked in immediately. The freezing killing intent that had invaded my veins was instantly refined and absorbed. Suddenly, a vision exploded in my mind. I saw a young beggar in tattered clothes. He was leaning on a sword, his expression cold and detached as he stared at a group of older beggars. An iPhone. If you want to beg on this turf, you follow my rules, the leader of the group barked. He stepped forward with a cruel sneer. I'll give you one chance. Crawl through my legs, and I'll let you stay. The boy, an iPhone, looked up. His eyes were like ice. What? You don't like that? The leader shouted. Don't think that just because you found a piece of scrap metal, you can act tough with me. I'll kill you, you hear me? This isn't scrap metal, the boy said, his voice as cold as his face. It's a sword. A sword? Can it even kill people? The leader laughed and reached out, slapping the boy's face in a humiliating gesture. Clang. The sound of the sword leaving its scabbard rang out. A second later, the leader was clutching his throat, eyes wide with disbelief. He collapsed to the ground, dead. One strike to the throat. A sword, naturally, can kill, the boy muttered. He didn't even look at the corpse. He slid the blood-stained blade back into its sheath and turned his freezing gaze toward the rest of the gang. They scattered like terrified animals, screaming and tripping over themselves to get away. The vision shifted. I saw the same boy, now a bit older, standing in a government courtroom. He drew his sword with a fluid, singular motion. A thin red line appeared on the magistrate's neck. The scene flashed again. The boy was in the middle of a massive battlefield, surrounded by thousands of soldiers. He drew his blade once more. The enemy general's head rolled before he could even blink. Every single memory was a repetition of that one specific action, drawing the sword. I opened my eyes and breathed out. Through those memories, I had mastered a new technique, the ultimate sword-drawing art. I instinctively gripped the hilt of the Bai Yi sword and pulled. Even though it was my first time performing the move, I felt like I had practiced it for decades. It was flawless. Perfect. What a terrifying strike, I whispered to myself, sheathing the blade. I was still reeling from the power of it. This wasn't just a move. It was a technique created by a genius who had started from nothing. It looked simple, but the mechanics behind it were divine. I thought back to the name the beggar had used, an iPhone. It sounded familiar. I racked my brain until it clicked. An iPhone, the master of the Dragon Guard Manor in the Great Long Empire, the Lord of Eternal Night. He was a legendary figure, second only to the Emperor himself. They said he was a slayer of 10,000, a man whose hands were permanently stained with the blood of his enemies. He was a living Shura. Could this plain-looking Bai Yi sword really have belonged to a man like that? It sounded like a fairy tale, but deep down, I knew it was true. Still, a sword is just a tool. An iPhone was the one who was powerful, not the blade itself. If he had kept using it, the Bai Yi might have truly evolved into a legendary demonic weapon. But he had clearly discarded it long ago, which was why it ended up gathering dust here in the pavilion. I put the sword back on the rack and sat down. I couldn't keep going. Even though my talent had refined the sword Shah, the process had drained me. I felt exhausted, my spirit depleted. The previous sword I handled was nothing compared to this one. It was a wake-up call. My talent wasn't a cheat code for invincibility. If I touched a sword that was too powerful, the backlash would kill me before I could even process the memories. Despite the fatigue, I couldn't stop smiling. This technique changed everything. If I had to retake the disciple exam now, I wouldn't just pass. I'd take the top spot easily. To everyone else, the sword pavilion was a graveyard. To me, it was a goldmine. I rested for about 2 hours until my energy started to return. Just as I was getting back on my feet, the heavy doors of the pavilion creaked open. A familiar face walked in. It was young Fei. He was a fellow handyman disciple, but he had recently been taken in as an apprentice by manager Wang. Yesterday, the two of them had kindly recommended me for this job. At the time, I didn't know what they were up to. But after talking to senior brother Luo and experiencing the pavilion for myself, I knew exactly what they wanted. They wanted me dead. I didn't know what I had done to offend them, but this wasn't some petty grudge. This was attempted murder. I wasn't the type to turn the other cheek. If I got the chance, I'd return the favor and put them both in the ground. What are you doing here? I asked, my voice flat. Yang Fei smirked, his eyes full of mockery. What's with the attitude? My master found you such a great job. Shouldn't you be thanking us? We both know what kind of job this is, I said, glaring at him. I'm curious, though. We don't have a history. Why go through all this trouble to kill me? Yang Fei laughed. Why? Because you're a toad trying to eat swan meat. Did you really think someone like you had a right to touch senior sister Li Shuero? My brow furrowed. Li Shuero? Yang Fei was a nobody. He wouldn't have the guts to target me over her on his own. Did Qianlechi send you? I asked. You think you're worth Brother Qian's personal attention? Yang Fei sneered. That was all I needed to hear. I finally understood. Li Shuero and I both came from the same place, Starwood Village. We were both orphans. Li Shuero and I grew up together. We were orphans from the same village, leaning on each other for survival since we were kids. Our bond was close, but for me, it was simple. She was the little sister I never had. There was no romance, no hidden feelings. But apparently, Qianlechi didn't see it that way. He had misunderstood everything and decided the best way to handle his jealousy was to have me erased. I couldn't exactly explain this to him. Even if I did, a guy like that wouldn't believe a word I said. Normally, I wouldn't care who Shuero chose to be with, but after this, it was clear that Qianlechi was a snake. He didn't deserve her. More importantly, I'm the type of person who pays back my debts in full. If someone tries to kill me, I don't let it slide. I didn't have the strength to crush him yet, but that was going to change very soon. I looked at Yang Fei, tired of his voice. I didn't have time for small fry drama. The Sword Pavilion isn't a place for a handyman like you, I said, my voice cold. Get lost. Yang Fei's face twisted with disdain. You piece of trash, you really think you're something now? If I were you, I'd find a nice spot with good feng shui and start digging my own grave. I didn't want to waste any more breath. Scram. Seeing a failure like me act so arrogant pushed him over the edge. You're asking for death. He lunged at me, brandishing a broken sword. I noticed the weapon immediately. He must have been here to exchange it. As a handyman, he had no right to claim a sword for himself, which meant he was just running errands for someone else. A literal lapdog, I didn't panic. I reached out, my hand moving with a fluid grace I hadn't possessed yesterday, and snatched a long sword from a nearby rack. Clang, the sound of the blade leaving the sheath rang through the hall. A flash of cold light erupted in the dim room. It was the ultimate sword-drawing art, learned only moments ago, but mastered perfectly. The next second, the broken sword flew out of Yang Fei's hand. A thin red line appeared on his throat. He clutched his neck, his eyes bulging with pure terror. For a heartbeat, he truly believed he was a dead man. The fear of death had never been so vivid. I looked down at him, my expression flat. You should be glad this is the Shushan sect. If we were anywhere else, you'd be a corpse. Yang Fei touched his throat with trembling fingers. He realized I had only grazed the skin. He broke into a cold sweat. If I had used even a fraction more power, I would have opened his windpipe. It was terrifying. How did the guy who ranked dead last in the handyman exams become this lethal? To control a blade with such precision, nicking the skin without hitting the vitals, was harder than just killing someone. Without a word, Yang Fei scrambled to his feet and sprinted out of the pavilion like a haunted man. He didn't even look back to grab the broken sword he'd dropped. I watched him run, feeling nothing but contempt. I wiped the blade clean, returned it to the rack, and picked up the broken sword he left behind. The moment my fingers touched the metal, information flooded my mind. Sword name, Black Rock. Weight, 7 pounds, 8 ounces. Length, 2 feet, 3 inches. My brows furrowed. There was no murderous intent attacking me this time. Unlike the other swords, there was no special energy flowing into my body either. I guessed that because it was broken, the spirit or essence of the sword was gone. It was just junk now. I tossed it into the recycling room and checked the registry log. I found the entry quickly, June 3rd. Yang Shi, ranked 41st among outer disciples, selected the Black Rock sword. Shushan had thousands of outer disciples, but only the top 50 were allowed to claim a sword from the pavilion as a reward. Inner disciples got them automatically. It looked like Yang Fei was running errands for a relative named Yang Shi. I shook my head. Yang Fei had just screwed over his cousin. If you bring a damaged sword back to exchange, it costs 3 spirit stones. If you lose the sword entirely, it costs 10. That 7-stone difference was a massive blow to an outer disciple's wallet. I had no sympathy for anyone associated with Yang Fei, so I wasn't about to go outside and give it back. If Yang sure wanted to cause trouble, let him come. I spent the rest of the afternoon finishing my work. I cleaned 20 swords in total. Most of them didn't have lethal killing intent, but each one provided a tiny thread of energy that strengthened my body. By sunset, senior brother Luo finally strolled back. He had claimed he was going out to buy supplies, but he returned empty-handed and reeking of alcohol. He'd clearly just gone to the tavern. I used to think being stationed at the sword pavilion was like a death sentence or life in prison. But seeing Luo so relaxed, I realized the guards here actually had a decent amount of freedom. It wasn't a bad gig if you could survive the swords. "Senior brother, you're back?" I said politely. Luo let out a loud, drunken burp and grinned. He tossed me a wine gourd. "Don't say I don't look out for you. Here's your share." He didn't wait for a thank you. He just headed straight for his room to crash. "It's about that time," he called out over his shoulder. "Lock the doors." I looked at the gourd and sighed. After locking the heavy main gates, I headed back to my own room. My work was done for the day. I took a sip of the wine, but winced. It tasted terrible. The alcohol in this world was nothing compared to what I remembered from my past life. I set the gourd on the table. "Time to get serious," I whispered to myself. I sat cross-legged on the bed. Thanks to my sword god communication talent, I had mastered 2 high-level sword techniques, and my combat skills were sharp. I could probably one-shot any handyman disciple now. But I had one major weakness: my cultivation. In this world, you weren't a real cultivator until you developed your first wisp of true chi. As a bottom-of-the-barrel disciple, I had absolutely none. I began to circulate the chi induction mantra. It was the most basic, entry-level technique for Shushan disciples. It was designed to pull energy into the body to create that first spark of power. Once I had that, I could move on to actual immortal cultivation techniques. For now, I was starting from the very bottom. I needed to break out of this pathetic situation. The only way forward was to master the chi induction mantra and cultivate my very first wisp of true chi. I was already familiar with the mantra. The original owner of this body had practiced it countless times, but he never succeeded. Having a trash-grade spiritual root was truly a hopeless existence. But this time, when I closed my eyes and focused, something felt different. I felt a faint warmth stirring in my lower abdomen. It clicked. Every time I had wiped a sword and absorbed those strange flows of energy, they had gathered right there. I frowned, concentrating. I didn't have inner vision yet, but I knew basic anatomy. That spot was my dantian. I didn't know exactly what that energy was, but it was moving now. My unique talent wouldn't betray me. It was here to help. As the warmth spread, the chi induction mantra began to circulate at a frantic pace. Usually, when I tried to practice, the energy moved like a toddler's tricycle. Now, it was like a Ferrari with the pedal to the floor. The difference was staggering. The speed was almost terrifying. I opened my eyes, stunned. I didn't need to understand the why right now. It was a good thing, and that was enough. I closed my eyes again and kept going. I didn't sleep a wink that night. When dawn broke, I stood up from the bed. Despite the all-nighter, I felt refreshed and sharp. Most importantly, a strand of true chi was finally swirling inside me. From this moment on, I wasn't a powerless loser anymore. I walked to the door and stretched. It felt amazing. I had officially started my journey as a cultivator. Well, almost. I still lacked a proper cultivation manual. The chi induction mantra was just a starter kit to get that first spark. To go further, I needed a real technique. Normally, a handyman disciple would be promoted to an outer disciple after reaching this stage and be given a manual. But I was a sword pavilion guard. I wasn't a handyman, and I wasn't an outer disciple. I was in a gray area. I had to wait for senior brother Luo. 3 hours later, long after the sun was high in the sky, he finally stumbled out of his room, looking hungover. By then, I had already finished cleaning 20 swords. I purposely avoided the cursed ones, so I hadn't triggered any more killing intent. "Wait," Luo said, squinting at me. "You actually did it? You cultivated true chi." I gave him a modest smile. "I'm in the sword pavilion now. If I want to live longer, I have to work hard." Luo nodded, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. "You've got the right attitude. To survive here, you have to get strong." I didn't waste time. Senior brother, now that I've reached this stage, how do I get a cultivation manual? You don't need to go anywhere, he grunted. I've got one right here. Wait. He ducked back into his room and tossed a small booklet at me a moment later. You could go to the library pavilion for the basic Shushanqi method, but that's bottom-tier junk. This is the Ling Feng mystery art. Since you have a trash-grade route with no specific element, you can practice anything. You might as well use this. My heart leaped. The name alone sounded way better than the basic stuff. But I hesitated. Senior brother, isn't it against the rules to practice techniques not officially assigned by the sect? I don't want to get punished. Luo let out a dry chuckle. Relax. This didn't come from the sect. Elder Ling gave it to me. Elder Ling? I asked, curious. He's upstairs, Luo said, gesturing vaguely. You'll meet him eventually. Just practice the Ling Feng art. You don't have to worry about a thing. Thank you, senior brother. Don't thank me. If I didn't give it to you, Elder Ling would have. You're part of the Sword Pavilion now. That afternoon, a visitor arrived at the gates. He didn't look friendly. Can I help you? I asked. The man glared at me. Are you Lin Yuan? I narrowed my eyes. He knew my name, and he had an attitude. I had a feeling I knew who this was. This had to be Yang Shi, the true owner of the broken sword Yang Fei dropped yesterday. I am, I said coldly. What do you want? Where is my sword? He demanded. I sent Yang Fei to exchange it yesterday. Not only did you beat him up, but you stole my sword. What kind of logic is that? I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Yang Fei attacked me. I taught him a lesson. He's the one who dropped the sword and ran away like a coward. If you want it back, talk to him. If you want a new one from the pavilion, the fee is 10 spirit stones. Those are the rules. Yang Shi's face turned red with rage. The sword is right here. An exchange only costs 3 stones. An exchange costs 3 stones if you have a sword to trade, I said flatly. But you don't have one, do you? You know damn well it's inside. I stared him down. If you don't have a sword in your hand, you aren't exchanging. You're buying. 10 stones. Are you playing with me? Yang Shi growled, stepping closer. You're just a handyman. You dare disrespect me? Do you want to die? I didn't flinch. I'm the lead guard of the Sword Pavilion. And you're nothing. Just then, Luo stepped out of his room. What's all the racket? This is the Sword Pavilion, not a cafeteria. He walked over and looked at me. What's going on? I explained everything. How Yang Fei tried to jump me, how I handled it, and how the idiot left his sword behind. Luo listened, then turned his cold gaze toward Yang Shi. You should look after your own gear, Luo barked. You gave it to someone else, they lost it, and now you're blaming us. If you want a sword, it's 10 stones. If you don't have the money, get lost. Luo then turned to me, loud enough for Yang Shi to hear. And you, kid, you're too soft. If someone comes to the Sword Pavilion to cause trouble, you should just kill them. There's no penalty for trash like this. Yang Shi turned pale. He could tell the old man wasn't joking. He realized he couldn't bully his way through this. Without another word, he turned tail and bolted. Once he was gone, I turned to senior brother Luo with a question. Senior brother Luo, I called out, my voice steady despite the adrenaline still pumping through my veins. If I had killed that Yang Fei yesterday, would I really have escaped punishment? Luo stopped and looked back at the retreating figure of Yang Shi. He turned to me with a faint, knowing smile. Kid, you haven't been at the Sword Pavilion long enough to understand how terrifying this place is. Anyone who comes here to cause trouble is already a dead man walking. He stepped closer, his voice dropping an octave. I'll tell you this much. If anyone dares to start trouble here again, kill them. It won't be an issue. Even the law enforcement hall of the Shushan sect takes a long detour just to avoid passing by the Sword Pavilion. Of course, that's assuming you have the strength to do it. If you're the one who ends up dead, don't expect anyone to argue your case. His words sent a surge of excitement through me. I realized then that I hadn't just been dumped in a graveyard. I had accidentally stumbled into a position of incredible power. And the real power wasn't Luo. It was the mysterious Elder Lin who lived upstairs. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the heavy doors of the Sword Pavilion groaned shut. I retreated to my room and sat cross-legged on the floor. It was time to finally start my official cultivation. I pulled out the manual for the Ling Feng mystery technique. It was a wind attribute cultivation method. While its raw attack power wasn't the highest, its speed was legendary. For me, Speed was everything. If I had stuck with the basic Shushan refining art, I'd be slow, weak, and utterly unremarkable. As I began to circulate my energy, that familiar warm current blossomed in my lower abdomen. I knew my natural talent, my spiritual root, was bottom-tier trash. Normally, I'd be lucky to see any progress after an entire night of meditation. But with this warm current acting as a booster, I could actually feel the wisp of true chi inside me growing stronger by the minute. The boost lasted for exactly half the night. By midnight, the warmth vanished, and my cultivation speed plummeted back to a snail's pace. I opened my eyes, feeling a deep sense of frustration. Going from high-speed progress to almost zero was agonizing. That warm current, I whispered to myself. It comes from the energy that flows into me every time I draw a sword. The realization filled me with a new kind of hunger. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was leveling up. I made a vow. From now on, I would clean 40 swords every single day. The next morning, I got straight to work. I moved carefully, avoiding the swords that radiated an obviously overwhelming aura. I wasn't suicidal. I wanted to wait until I was stronger to tackle the big ones. But fate had other plans. By the 13th sword, I hit a snag. The blade looked ordinary, even dull. It was called Black Wind. But as any veteran will tell you, even a common blade becomes a demon if it drinks enough blood. The moment my cloth touched the steel, a violent surge of sword chi erupted. It didn't just sting, it felt like 1,000 fire ants were burrowing into my skin and eating me from the inside out. My body went into a violent spasm. My sword god communication talent kicked in immediately, desperately trying to refine the energy, but this time, it was a struggle. Suddenly, my vision blurred. I wasn't in the sword pavilion anymore. I was standing on the edge of a jagged cliff. A man in green robes stood there, his sword pointed at the throat of a woman in a white dress. She was beautiful, her face streaked with tears as she clutched her stomach. "Li Qingyun," she wailed. "How can you be this heartless? I am your wife. I am carrying your child." The man's expression flickered with a momentary hesitation, but it vanished instantly, replaced by a mask of cold stone. "Choer, I'm sorry," he said, his voice like ice. "I hope you never meet me in your next life." The woman, Choer, stood tall, her eyes defiant. "Do it then. I don't believe you can be this cruel. I don't believe you can murder your own flesh and blood." "I have to," Li Qingyun replied. "I must master the ultimate heartless sword. I have already sacrificed too much for this technique." "What could you have possibly sacrificed?" she screamed. Li Qingyun sighed, a look of profound complexity crossing his face. "Choer, I lied to you. The monster who wiped out my entire clan wasn't some blood demon from the mountains. It was me." The woman froze. She looked at him as if he were a demon crawled straight out of hell. "I slaughtered my own family to cultivate this art," he continued, his voice devoid of emotion. "I wanted to become the sect leader of the Wuji sword sect. But I still haven't mastered it. I'm not heartless enough yet. Because you are still alive." At those words, the light left Choer's eyes. Her soul seemed to shrivel up and die before the blade even touched her. The man she loved wasn't a man at all. He was a monster. She slowly closed her eyes, welcoming death. There was no point in living in a world where such evil existed. A flash of sword light blinded me. It was the ultimate heartless sword. Li Qingyun laughed, a twisted, manic sound of pure satisfaction, as the blade pierced her heart. A spray of blood bloomed across her white dress like a red spider lily. He gave her body a gentle push, watching with a smile as his wife and unborn child tumbled into the abyss. Back in the sword pavilion, I collapsed. I hit the floor hard, gasping for air, my entire body trembling. Pain, violence, coldness, madness. The emotions from the memory were crashing inside my skull like waves against a cliff. I felt like my mind was going to shatter. Senior brother Luo walked out of his room just then and saw me crumpled on the floor, clutching the Black Wind sword. He just shook his head and offered a dry chuckle. He wasn't surprised at all. Every disciple who worked here went through this. In his mind, I was actually handling it better than he had. I ignored him, focused entirely on regaining control. It took several minutes before I could even stand. My legs were weak, but I forced myself to wipe the Black Wind sword one last time before sliding it back onto the rack. As the blade clicked into place, a fresh surge of energy flowed into my body, replenishing the warm current in my abdomen. The price was high, but the reward was undeniable. I was ready for more. The rewards of the sword pavilion were undeniable. Every time I refined a sword's killing intent, it bolstered my cultivation significantly. That was why I pushed myself so hard. I had already increased my daily output from 20 swords to 40. Senior brother Luo didn't even glance my way anymore. He just went about his business, heading off to wash up with a bored expression. I didn't keep cleaning. I pulled up a stool and collapsed onto it, my lungs burning. The killing intent from the Black Wind sword had been brutal. It was far more terrifying than the Bai Yi sword. If any other servant disciple had tried to handle that blade, the mental invasion would have killed them instantly. Even with my sword god communication talent, I felt like my soul had been put through a meat grinder. I had suffered internal injuries, and my essence was drained. It wasn't the sword itself that was scary. It was the technique, the ultimate heartless sword. To cultivate it, one had to sever all emotions, wipe out their own family, and murder their own wife and child. How could such a vile technique exist? But I realized then that the sword wasn't the evil part. Human hearts were. The person who chose to practice such a thing was the true monster. I sat there, gasping for air, trying to calm my racing heart. Two names from the memory were burned into my mind: Li Qingyun and the Wuji Sword Sect. I knew those names. The Wuji Sword Sect was a famous, righteous sect, just like my own Shushan sect. And Li Qingyun was their sect leader. A wave of cold irony washed over me. A man that insane was leading a righteous sect? What a joke. He was the definition of a hypocrite. In the memory, I had felt a blinding rage. I wanted to kill him myself. It wasn't just curiosity. I had felt his wife's despair as if it were my own. But I knew the reality. Li Qingyun was as powerful as the leader of Shushan. To him, I was just an ant. For now, give me 60 years, and I knew I would surpass him. I looked at the Black Wind sword on the rack. The sword pavilion really was a treasure trove. Even here on the first floor, which was considered the trash tier, there were weapons that once belonged to legends. They might have been the weapons these masters used when they were young and weak, but the fact that Shushan collected them at all was staggering. Ultimate heartless sword, I whispered, refining that killing intent hadn't just given me trauma. I had gained a seed of the ultimate heartless sword intent. It wasn't a full technique, it was a spark. High-level swordplay doesn't rely on flashy moves, it relies on intent. I had no intention of actually practicing this heartless path. I wasn't going to torture myself or lose my humanity for power. With my talent, I'd find plenty of other intents later. However, I realized I could use this seed as a one-time weapon. I could trigger it to explode in a single, devastating strike. It would destroy the seed, but the power would be catastrophic. With that one strike, I could probably defeat any outer disciple in the sect. Maybe even an inner disciple wouldn't stand a chance. This place really is my lucky land, I muttered. I had only been here 3 days, but I was already a completely different person. After resting for an hour, the heavy doors of the pavilion creaked open. A young man walked in. I stood up, feeling my strength returning, and blocked his path. "Why are you here?" I asked. The disciple bowed deeply. He was respectful, as most disciples were when dealing with the sword pavilion. "I am Lu Wei, an outer disciple ranked 50th. I'm here to claim a sword." I frowned. The outer disciple rankings haven't started yet. "How did your rank change?" "One of the senior brothers passed away," Lu Wei explained. "I was 51st, so I moved up." I blinked. I didn't realize it worked like that, but it made sense. "Fine. You can choose any sword from the first floor. But be warned, some of these blades are dangerous. If you're greedy and pick one you can't handle, the killing intent will bite back." "I understand," he said, nodding seriously. He wandered through the racks and eventually picked a blade. He drew it and started practicing a few forms in the middle of the hall to see if it fit. I recognized the style immediately, the Willow Wind sword. I had never studied it, yet as I watched him move, I could see every flaw. Every hesitation, every gap in his defense stood out like a sore thumb. I subconsciously moved my finger like a sword, tracing a line in the air that corrected his clumsy form. If anyone saw me now, they'd never call me a trash-tier talent again. Lu Wei stopped, his brow furrowed. He looked frustrated. It doesn't feel right. It's not smooth. He only had one free choice. If he wanted to swap later, it would cost him 3 spirit stones. He was being cautious. You're not happy with it? I asked. He sighed. I've tried several. This one seemed the best, but something is off. I can't put my finger on it. I looked him up and down and smiled. Your arms aren't the same length. Your right arm is half an inch shorter than your left. You need a longer blade to compensate. Also, your grip is weird. You like to keep your pinky off the handle, braced against the pommel. You need a sword with a shorter hilt. I walked over to a rack, pulled out a specific blade, and tossed it to him. As I did, I partially unsheathed it, letting the faint warmth of its energy flow into me. I wasn't going to waste a single drop of cultivation. Try this one, I said. It's a better fit for a body like yours. I waited until a surge of warm energy flowed from the sword into my body before tossing the blade to Lu Wei. He caught it and gave it a test swing. A look of pure joy instantly flooded his face. My choice was perfect. The sword fit him like a glove. He practiced a few more forms, looking more satisfied with every movement. Then, he turned to me and gave a deep, respectful bow. Thank you, senior brother. He didn't actually know if I was his senior or junior, but the title was a sign of genuine respect. He was truly impressed. Don't mention it, I said calmly. The sword pavilion isn't a place to linger. Now that you've picked your blade, register it and head out. Lu Wei didn't waste a second. He registered the sword and practically skipped out the door, clutching his new prize. As soon as he was gone, senior brother Luo appeared. He was clutching a wine gourd and looking at me with a surprised expression. Kid, you've got some skill. I gave him a shy smile. You flatter me, senior brother. Luo shook his head. It's not flattery. It's a real compliment. A person like you is wasted in the sword pavilion. You should be out there making a name for yourself. Actually, I feel like the sword pavilion suits me quite well, I replied quickly. Fair enough, Luo said, clapping me on the shoulder. If you can actually survive this place, your achievements will be higher than anything you could find outside. Keep practicing. Once you hit the 5th level of chi refinement, I'll take you to see Elder Lin. I'll work hard, I promised, nodding seriously. My eyes drifted to the gourd in his hand. I hesitated, then asked, Senior brother, is that the gourd from my room? Luo rolled his eyes at me. You have the nerve to ask? I gave you a whole gourd of fine wine, and you didn't even drink it. The spirit energy was starting to fade. What a waste of a good treasure. My tolerance is a bit low, I admitted. I only had one sip. Luo didn't seem to care that I'd already drank from it. He took a long swig directly from the gourd. You don't know how to enjoy the finer things. Boring. He gave me a look of pure disdain and wandered out of the pavilion, probably off to find more trouble. I felt a pang of envy. Since I'd arrived at the sword pavilion, I hadn't stepped foot outside once. I decided that when he got back, I'd ask if I could leave for a while. I spent the rest of the afternoon cleaning swords. I didn't stop until I had finished 40 of them. Luckily, none of them carried the same violent killing intent as the Black Wind sword. That blade had drained a lot of my energy, and I still hadn't fully recovered. As the sun began to set, Luo returned. Just like the day before, he smelled like a brewery and had a fresh gourd hanging from his waist. The man was a total drunk. That was good to know. If I ever needed a favor from him, a bottle of top-shelf liquor would be the perfect bribe. That night, I continued practicing the Ling Wen technique. After absorbing so much energy from the swords during the day, the familiar warmth pooled in my abdomen again. With this, I knew I would reach the 2nd level of chi refinement very soon. I pushed myself until dawn, only stopping when the last bit of energy was spent. I woke up early as usual. Luo, however, didn't crawl out of his room until the sun was high in the sky. He looked like he'd barely slept. Kid, you don't need to be so diligent, he said with a massive yawn. Even if you sleep until the afternoon, nobody is going to complain. What if a disciple comes to pick a sword in the morning? I asked awkwardly. Luo shrugged. Then let them wait. We open when we feel like it. The rule of the sword pavilion is simple. We close exactly at sunset. Opening time is purely based on our mood. I blinked. The sword pavilion was even more casual than I thought. Senior brother, I have a question. Ask away, he said, sounding lazy as ever. If I have errands to run, can I leave the pavilion for a bit? I felt a little unsure asking. I was the new guy, after all. It felt like asking for a vacation on my first week of work. Of course, Luo said. Just be back before we close the doors at sunset. If I'm here, just go. If I'm out, just make sure you lock the main gate behind you. I was stunned. It was that easy. One more thing, I continued. Outer disciples get 1 hour a day in the cultivation hall. Since I'm the lead sword attendant, my status is the same as an outer disciple. Can I go there too? Sure. You just started chi refinement, so the hall might actually help you. Luo looked at me like the hall was a distant memory. For someone at his level, it was useless. The hall has a small spirit gathering array, but it's really only effective for those below the 6th level of chi refinement. After that, the benefits are tiny. Then I'll go check it out now, I said. Luo chuckled. Go ahead. I'm staying put today anyway. Stepping out of the sword pavilion felt amazing. The air felt fresher, the world brighter. I had been cooped up for days. I made my way to the Shushan cultivation hall. It was massive, built to hold over 1,000 disciples. But when I sat down and started to practice, my heart sank. The warm energy I'd gathered from the swords was gone, and without it, my progress was glacial. Even with the spirit gathering array, I could barely feel the Ling Wind technique moving. It was no faster than practicing in my room without the sword energy. What a waste of time. I could have cleaned 5 swords in the time it took to walk here. I decided right then that I wouldn't be coming back tomorrow. For other disciples, a small boost was better than nothing, but for me, it was a distraction. I stood up to leave, but then I spotted a familiar face. Well, someone I'd seen once before. Yahello. He was ranked 41st among the outer disciples. The fact that he was still here meant he hadn't reached the 6th level of chi refinement yet. I realized then that the top, outer disciples weren't nearly as powerful as I'd once thought. Back then, I looked up to them like they were gods. Now, they were just targets. Back then, I used to look at the outer disciples like they were gods. As a mere handyman, the gap between us felt like heaven and earth. But standing there in the cultivation hall, I realized they weren't all that special. As I spotted Yahello, he spotted me too. Of course, enemies always seem to find each other. He stared at me with a cold, mocking sneer. Back at the sword pavilion, he didn't dare touch me because senior brother Luo was watching. But this was the cultivation hall. Luo wasn't here to protect me. Meng Fan, he said, walking over with his head held high. I didn't think you'd have the guts to leave the pavilion. I couldn't touch you there, but things are different now. He stood right in front of me, acting like he owned the place. I just smiled and gave him a bored look. And what exactly do you plan to do? That depends on you, he growled. Either give me back my black flame sword, or don't expect to walk out of here in one piece. I shrugged. I doubt you'd be stupid enough to start a fight inside the cultivation hall. This isn't a place for brawling. Yahello let out a harsh laugh. Fine, I'll wait outside. Unless you plan on hiding in here forever. It was pathetic. It felt like a little kid on a playground telling me to meet him behind the school after class. I didn't even bother arguing. Even though he was ranked in the top 50 of the outer disciples, I wasn't afraid of him. He was likely at the 5th level of chi refinement. On paper, that made him much stronger than my 1st level cultivation. He had more internal energy, more stamina, and more raw power. But that was just numbers. It didn't mean he knew how to actually fight with a sword. In my mind, it was simple. If I could suppress him with a single strike, his stamina wouldn't matter. If I could find his weakness, his power wouldn't matter. Unless someone is at the 7th or 8th level where their energy is so overwhelming that technique becomes irrelevant, I can outplay them. Yahello wasn't that strong. I knew I could make a fool out of him. He stormed out to wait for me. I followed right behind. I was leaving anyway, and I wasn't going to let a guy like him change my schedule. When he saw me walk out so soon, his eyes widened in surprise. He probably expected me to cower inside for hours. You've got guts, kid, he hissed. Last chance. Give me the sword, and I'll let this go. The sword pavilion took the black flame sword back, I said calmly. If you want it, go find 10 spirit stones and buy it back yourself. We were standing in the martial arts arena outside the hall. Yahello grabbed a wooden practice sword from a nearby rack and pointed it at me. Don't say I'm bullying you. Today, you pay the price. I grabbed a wooden sword of my own. These were blunt, basic tools with no edge at all. Shushan keeps all its real weapons in the sword pavilion. Even Yahello, an outer disciple, was so broke he didn't have a personal weapon to use after losing his last one. He could have scraped together the 10 stones if he really tried, but he was too bitter about the loss. He blamed me for everything. Nobody in the arena paid us much attention. Disciples sparred here all the time. Yang Shi drew his wooden sword. Even with a practice weapon, he managed to radiate a bit of killing intent. He was clearly fuming. With a sudden burst of speed, he lunged at me. He flicked his wrist, performing a flashy, decorative sword flower in the air before striking. I almost laughed. Flashy and useless. He was looking down on me so much that he wasted movement on style instead of substance. To my eyes, his opening move was a giant map of weaknesses. I moved. I didn't wait for him to finish his flourish. My sword whipped out, the flat of the blade slamming hard against his wrist. The impact was perfect. His wooden sword flew from his hand. Before he could even process the loss, I stepped past him and delivered a brutal sidekick to his ribs. Crack. The sound of at least 3 ribs breaking echoed in the air. It was effortless. I hadn't even used my internal energy yet. If I had, the damage would have been double, though it would have drained me instantly. Yang Shi hit the dirt, gasping for air. He looked up at me, his face twisted in pure shock. He couldn't believe a handyman was this strong. Yang Fei had warned him I was dangerous, but he hadn't listened. To him, a servant was a servant. But in that one exchange, he realized I had completely read him. I controlled the rhythm, the distance, and the timing. My combat experience was on a level that made him look like an amateur. He had more energy than me, sure, but in a real fight, I was miles ahead. I took a step forward and placed my foot directly on his face. It was a total humiliation. "You're dead," he roared. His internal energy exploded, shoving my foot back and forcing me to retreat a couple of steps. He scrambled up, eyes bloodshot. Since he'd lost his sword, he threw a desperate punch at my head. I used the golden hong footwork I'd been practicing, slipping past his fist like a shadow. Chick! I flicked my wrist, and the tip of my wooden sword came to rest right against his throat. It was blunt, but with enough force, I could still crush his windpipe. "Your swordsmanship is trash," I said coldly. "Your awareness is even worse. You have all that cultivation, and you don't know how to use a bit of it." Normally, he would have spat at me for saying that. But with the wood pressing against his neck, he didn't have a choice. His throat bobbed as he swallowed hard. I give up," he muttered. He meant it. He was terrified. He probably thought the sword pavilion was some cursed place that turns servants into monsters in just a few days. "Then get lost," I said, lowering the sword. Yang Shi didn't say another word. He turned and limped away, finally realizing he was way out of his depth. I didn't know it at the time, but I was being watched. High above the martial arts hall, on the roof of a secluded pavilion, 2 old men sat over a game of chess. They had seen the whole thing. A level 1 chi refiner just crushed a level 5. One of them remarked, eyes fixed on me. "It's been a long time since our Shushan sword sect produced a talent like that." The other old man stroked his beard, his expression thoughtful. "Below level 6, the gap in raw energy isn't insurmountable. If someone truly masters sword technique, fighting above their level is possible. Still, this kid is eye-catching." He paused, checking a mental ledger. "A shame his talent is graded as mortal waste. His ceiling is far too personally low." "Mortal waste? So what?" the first old man countered. "Did you see his timing? He struck twice, and both times he exploited a flaw in his opponent's movement with surgical precision. He saw right through that boy's sword style. That kind of comprehension is terrifying. It might just be enough to make up for his poor roots." "Maybe, but it's a long shot," the second replied. "Personally, I'm still betting on Li Shuero. She has heavenly grade roots. She's better than everyone else in every category. Comparing a god-tier talent to a waste-tier one? That's low, even for you." I wasn't in a hurry to get back to the sword pavilion. I rarely got the chance to leave that graveyard, and I wanted to make the most of it. I wandered over to the Sword Enlightenment Hall. Unlike the Martial Arts Hall, which focused on internal energy and cultivation, this place was dedicated entirely to the blade. This was where disciples came to spar and exchange pointers. It wasn't about blood or grudges here. It was about the art. Sometimes, lower-level disciples would even pay seniors to guide them. The moment I stepped inside, my heart skipped a beat. This was exactly what I needed. To anyone else, the dozens of disciples practicing different styles would have been a blurry, confusing mess. But with my sword god communication talent, it was like a feast laid out before a starving man. I sat quietly in a corner and watched. My talent allowed me to see the intent behind every movement. To me, these secret sword techniques weren't hidden at all. It was like looking at a beautiful woman with her clothes stripped away. Everything was exposed. Every flaw, every strength, every hidden rhythm was laid bare. I sat there for 2 hours, unmoving. In my mind, I was simulating every style I saw, fixing the mistakes the disciples were making, and perfecting the forms. It was a level of learning that shouldn't have been possible. Even a grandmaster might master a dozen styles in a lifetime. I was absorbing them in minutes. But my intense staring didn't go unnoticed. Directly in front of me, a female disciple had been practicing her forms. She was talented, but she was getting increasingly frustrated. She kept glancing back at me, her face flushing with anger. To her, I wasn't a student of the blade. I was a creep. I'd been staring at her for 2 straight hours without blinking. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. She marched over and stood over me, her shadow blocking my view. "You, get up," she snapped. I blinked, snapped out of my trance, and stood up, feeling a bit dazed. "Me? Am I pretty?" she asked, her voice cold as ice. I was caught off guard. That wasn't the question I expected. Yes. You're very pretty." I tried to be polite. I didn't want any trouble on my first day out. "Even if I am," she hissed, "there's no reason for you to sit behind me and stare at my back for 2 hours straight. It's disgusting and rude." My eyes went wide. She thought I was a stalker. "Wait, no? You've got it wrong. I wasn't looking at you. I was watching everyone practice." She let out a harsh, mocking laugh. "Watching everyone? You sat directly behind me the whole time. How do you explain that?" There was no way to explain it without sounding like a lunatic. I was stuck. "Look, I'm telling the truth," I said, trying to stay calm. "I was just observing the sword styles." "Excuses," she said, drawing her sword. "If you've really been observing for so long, then you must have learned something. Prove it. Spar with me. I'm going to teach you a lesson you won't forget." I sighed. "Is this really necessary?" "Scared?" she sneered. "If you weren't peeping and you were actually studying, then you should be able to perform the technique I just practiced. If you can show me even a fraction of it, I'll believe you. Otherwise, I'm reporting you to the elders." I looked at her. Her technique was complex. Most people would need 10 days of intense study just to get the basics down. But for me, it was already burned into my brain. "Fine," I said, "but if I can do it, you have to apologize and admit you were wrong about me." "Deal," she said, her lip curling. "I want to see how long you can keep up this act." She had no idea who she was dealing with. "What's the name of the style?" I asked. "The Jade Sea Rising Tide," she replied proudly. I nodded. I had seen her perform it dozens of times. "It's a good style. It looks soft and weak on the surface, but it's continuous. Like the tide, one wave follows another. It's designed to use an opponent's strength against them. You just have to pull them into your rhythm." I picked up my wooden training sword. It was time to show her what a real genius looked like.